Hi everyone, tonight we're going to tell the story of a wedding toast, one that started as a joke and ended up changing everything. Picture this, a room full of designer gowns, glittering champagne flutes, and one sister who thought she was being clever. You probably won't survive emotionally if you've ever been the disappointment in the family, because tonight, well, we're going to talk about what happens when people laugh at your life and then have to beg you to save theirs. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started tonight to the happy couple who always did like playing in the mud. That's what my sister Tamara said, champagne flute, raised smile shining like a chandelier, and then she giggled just enough to make it seem like a joke. Around the reception hall, 200 wedding guests joined in her laughter like it was cue-carded. It wasn't even what she said. It was how she said it, dripping with that brittle, practiced sweetness that could cut diamonds. Peyton's hand tightened around mine under the table. His thumb brushed over my palm in slow, reassuring circles, but my cheeks were already burning. That kind of laugh, it doesn't just humiliate you, it brands you. In that moment, I was no longer Bethany the bride. I was Bethany the mud girl. Bethany, honey, smile, my mum hissed in my ear, her nails sharp as her whisper dug into my arm. People are watching. Of course they were watching. They always watched me like waiting for a sitcom character to fall on her face. You know how some families keep tallies of achievements? Mine kept tallies of who'd embarrassed the Blair name most recently. Spoiler alert, it was usually me. I sat in my grandmother's altered wedding dress, lace, slightly yellowed, but holding together, while Tamara sat glowing in her designer bridesmaid gown. It was like watching Cinderella marry the footman in front of a crowd who'd bet good money it wouldn't last a year. I still can't believe you're marrying a farmer, my youngest sister Erin whispered as she slid into the seat beside me. She said it like she was commenting on the weather, not the most important decision of my life. At least say it like you believe in love, I replied. I do, she said quickly. It's just, Mum's been popping antacids all week. Comforting. You know what I mean. I looked across the room and spotted Tamara, now holding court at the head table, effortlessly beautiful. She'd always been that way, magnetic in a way that didn't invite, but demanded admiration. MBA from Stanford corner office in Manhattan, a husband who wore $1,000 suits and talked about market volatility at Thanksgiving. Meanwhile, I'd brought a man who had literal dirt on his boots. Ladies and gentlemen, my father's voice boomed suddenly through the speakers. I tensed. He stood at the podium with the solemnity of someone about to read a will. His silver hair was perfectly combed, his jaw clenched like this speech had been approved by a panel of disappointed ancestors. I'd like to say a few words about my daughter, Bethany. There it was. The pause before the judgment. Bethany has always been unique. Tamara smirked into her champagne. While her sisters pursued ambition and success, Bethany chose a simpler path. Simpler, like a synonym for lesser. She's chosen to marry Peyton, a man who works with his hands, a man who understands hard work. His words were meant to sound like praise, but each one landed like a verdict. We wish them happiness in their humble life together. Polite applause followed. Sparse obligatory. I glanced at my mother. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, but I wasn't sure if they were tears of joy or mourning. Your dad's really laying it on thick, Peyton whispered. He's been workshopping that speech for weeks, I replied. Tamara leaned into Elijah and whispered something behind her palm. They both laughed. I didn't need the audio to know it was about me. Let me pause here for a second to say something my grandmother once told me, something that stuck. There are two kinds of people who smile at you, the ones who mean it and the ones who are sharpening knives with their teeth. Gee, I don't know what made me do it. Maybe it was the heat on my neck, maybe it was Peyton's calm hand anchoring me, but I stood up. The chair scraped loudly across the floor. Conversation stopped mid-giggle. I raised my water glass because, of course, I was too practical to waste champagne and face the crowd. To family, I said, and to learning who actually has your back when it matters. Tamara's smile faltered just a flicker. She recovered fast, but I'd seen it. The tiniest hairline fracture. Everyone raised their glasses, murmured to family, and smiled like it meant something. But to me, that toast was a line drawn in the sand. Peyton leaned in, close his lips, just brushing my ear. That's my girl. And I had no idea then just how prophetic that moment would turn out to be. Peyton always said our love story began in a grocery store parking lot. That's not technically true, but I'll let him have it. He likes the poetry of it, me with a busted cart of wilted kale, him covered in mud boots leaking water. We were both trying to get home before the next storm. Turns out we were both stuck in one. I was fresh out of a teaching contract I didn't renew, trying to figure out what the heck to do with my environmental science degree besides collect student debt. He was running late for a delivery of organic carrots to some farm-to-table startup. My cart hit a pothole, vegetables went flying and the rest. Well, apparently, that's how fairy tales start, when you're from the kind of town where everyone knows your dog's name, but not your resume. He helped me gather the greens, apologised like it was his fault the pavement was cracked, and offered me a carrot from his truck as consolation. No joke. A whole raw carrot, like we were bunnies on a blind date. And I said yes, not to marriage. Just to coffee. Fast forward 8 months and we were living in a rental on the edge of his family's old farmland. It was just the two of us, a couple of rusting tractors and one radio that only played country music, no matter which station we tried. I'm not sure my parents would call this a career, I told him once while we were fixing a fence in the rain. He grinned that crooked kind of grin that made my stomach do gymnastics. Good thing we're not building it for them. See, Peyton didn't care about suits or titles or the stock market. He cared about tomatoes that tasted like sunshine and soil pH levels, and whether the irrigation system was 3 degrees off. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. We built raised beds from recycled wood, patched together, a greenhouse with old storm windows, and slowly transformed overgrown land into something that gave back. And somehow, in all that mud and elbow grease, I stopped feeling like a disappointment. Well, until the first Christmas at my parents' house. Still playing farm, Tamara had said, balancing a champagne flute in one hand and a tiny cheese cube in the other. It's called agricultural management, I replied. We run a small produce business. Oh, sweetie, she'd said like that clarified things. That's adorable. I didn't tell her about the pre-orders we had from 4 local restaurants. I didn't mention that our CSA program was sold out for the season. Why bother? But Peyton, he saw me swallowing all that. And that night, after we got home, he handed me a notebook. Write it all down, he said. All the things they don't see, because someday they're going to wish they had. I started doing just that. Every grant we applied for, every new vegetable we introduced to the soil, every single stupid thing Tamara said. That last one was more for entertainment than data. You want your quirky fact? Here it is. Okra plants scream when they're stressed. Not in human sounds, of course, but chemically. They release a signal that nearby plants can detect like a warning system. I read that in a journal one night and thought, yep, that's me at family dinner. Somewhere between year 2 and 3, Peyton stopped calling it a farm and started calling it the lab. I didn't think much of it at the time. He always had tinkering projects going. Old irrigation valves, soil monitors, sensors from who knows where. What I didn't know was that he was slowly turning our land into a real-time research site. And what I really didn't know was that while I was still debating whether I should go back to school, he was filing patents, quietly, carefully. He never bragged, never hinted, just said things like, you know, if we rotate those crops and reroute the water, we can save 30% of our output. And I'd nod and say, cool, like I understood 10% of what he said. which, to be fair, was about accurate. But what I did understand was this: I was happy. I was tired in the kind of way that felt earned. I had dirt under my nails and calluses on my hands, and my heart was full. And Peyton, he made even the hardest days feel like part of some bigger plan. There's this academic debate in relationship psychology about what creates long-term satisfaction in couples. Some say it's compatibility, others say it's shared struggle. Me, I think it's trust. Not the big dramatic kind, but the quiet daily version. The kind where you look at each other after a 12-hour workday and say, yeah, I'd do it all over again. But of course, none of that mattered to my family. To them, we were still the ones playing house in the dirt. The next time we saw them was at my cousin Hannah's engagement party. They had a string quartet and a sushi chef. We brought homemade pickles in mason jars. Charming, my mother said, which in Blair speak meant embarrassing. At one point, I overheard Tamara saying, "It's a phase. She'll snap out of it eventually." Bethany always did want to rebel against what a life I didn't want, a set of expectations that never fit. I remember gripping my wine glass a little too tightly and thinking, maybe I should have said something, but I didn't. Not yet. I wasn't ready, but I would be. Because sometimes life gives you a moment when you realise all those little insults, the ones you let slide, the ones you laughed off, have formed something bigger, a story they've written about you, and the only way to rewrite it is to stop playing along. They say you can't pick your family, but you can pick your seat at the annual Blair family barbecue. Or at least you can try until Tamara reassigns everyone, like it's a wedding reception and she's the queen of social strategy. It had been 3 years since the wedding. I'd shown up with a casserole and a clean pair of boots, already feeling like I'd overdressed. Peyton and I had brought homemade green bean casserole fresh from our garden and topped with crispy onions I'd actually fried myself. Not fancy, but real. "Oh," Tamara said, her eyes flicking to the dish like it might sprout legs and crawl away. "You brought food." "Green bean casserole," I said, placing it carefully next to the professionally catered spread from the farm. "Is it?" Organic Elijah asked, materialising behind her like a villain in a low-budget courtroom drama. He was holding a martini and wearing a polo shirt so stiff it probably needed its own closet. "It's homegrown," Peyton said, stepping up beside me. His shirt was simple, his jeans were clean but well-worn. The man looked like he belonged in a denim ad, not a hedge fund portfolio. "Right. The farming thing," Elijah said, nodding with exaggerated interest. "How's that going? Still playing in the dirt?" "We're doing well," I said evenly. "The farm's been profitable for 2 years running." Tamara's laugh tinkled out musical brittle. Profitable. That's adorable. Elijah just closed a deal last week worth more than your little farm probably makes in a decade. I clenched my jaw. "That's great for Elijah," I said. "We're happy with what we've built." That's when my father appeared, sipping a bourbon and looking like he'd just lost an election. "I've been meaning to ask," he said. "This farming venture, when do you plan to do something more substantial with your lives?" Donald, my mother, warned in that tight-lipped way. That means she agrees, but also wants plausible deniability. "We're happy," Peyton said calmly. "It's honest work." "Honest work," Elijah repeated, swirling his martini like it might reveal the secret to humility. That's one way to put it. Watching you two at family events is like watching a nature documentary. Here we see the simple farm folk in their natural habitat. Notice the plaid, the weathered hands, the casserole that hasn't been store-bought since 2019. The laughter was light and cruel. I felt the blood rising in my ears. "At least we sleep well at night," I said before I could stop myself. The laughter stopped. Elijah's smile cracked. "What's that supposed to mean?" Tamara asked sharply, stepping in like I'd just insulted the crown. "Nothing," I said too quickly. "Just physical work makes you tired." "Oh, Bethany, Always the diplomat until you accidentally throw a grenade. Well, my mother said, her voice turning chipper, like a flight attendant in turbulence who wants to see the new pool house. The crowd dispersed like startled birds following Tamara into her backyard palace. I started to go too, but Peyton caught my arm. "I'm going to check on the truck," he said. "Make sure we didn't leave the windows down." We both knew it was a lie. He needed air. "I'll come with you." "Stay," he said gently. "Enjoy your family." The word enjoy landed like a joke, the kind without a punchline. So I stayed, alone by the pool, sipping warm white wine and listening to the splashy sounds of people who'd never had to defend their life choices over potato salad. That's when Erin appeared, 2 glasses of wine in hand. "They're being awful today," she said, offering me one. "Today?" She winced. "Okay, always, thanks." We clinked glasses quietly. She looked around before leaning in. "Things have been tense lately. Elijah's firm's been shaky. Shaky how? I probably shouldn't." "Erin," she sighed. "Some of his big investments didn't pan out. Tamara's been dropping hints about adjusting their lifestyle. She even mentioned selling the Hampton house." I blinked. The Hampton house. They practically renamed it after themselves. "Yeah, well, apologies to Tamara Blair Olson Estates. I should have felt bad. I really should have. But there was this small, secretive part of me that buzzed with something that wasn't quite joy, but it wasn't sorrow either." "You think they'd ever admit it?" I asked. "Never," Erin said. "They'll throw a party and call it a downsizing celebration." We both laughed maybe a little too hard. Tamara's voice sliced through the air a moment later. "Bethany, come, settle a debate for us." I gave Erin a look that screamed, "Save me," but she just gave a helpless shrug. The crowd was gathered near the outdoor bar. "We were just talking about career trajectories," Tamara said sweetly. "And I was saying how you've really found your calling. I mean, not everyone can handle the intellectual demands of, what do you call it, subsistence farming." The group laughed on cue. "But don't you ever wonder," she continued, "what you could have accomplished if you'd applied yourself, really applied yourself?" And just like that, we were back in high school. I sat down my glass with precision. "Real life does happen," I said, "and sometimes it happens in ways you never see coming." Silence. Even the laughers didn't know if they were supposed to join in. "Here's your old age wisdom, by the way. My grandmother used to say, the folks who mock you from the porch usually have termites under their feet." I never knew what that meant until Tamara bought a $2 million house with a crumbling foundation, metaphorically, and according to Erin, maybe literally. So I just stood there smiling, that fake smile wrapped around a real punch, and walked back to the garden path like I hadn't just dropped a match in a gas leak. That night, Peyton and I drove home without saying much. He held my hand the whole way, and I couldn't help but think about how many more times they were going to test us. Spoiler, it wouldn't be long. The call came on a Tuesday. I'd just finished transplanting seedlings when my phone buzzed an unknown number, which was never a good sign. I almost let it go to voicemail. I wish I had. Bethany. The voice was older than I remembered, tired, fraying at the edges like a favourite dishcloth that's held together by habit more than thread. "Mom." "Oh, sweetheart. Yes, I hope I'm not calling at a bad time." "You mean, besides the last 30 years, I'm okay. What's up?" "Well," she said, drawing the word out like taffy, "we were hoping you and Peyton could come by the house this weekend. There's something we need to discuss. As a family." There it was. The phrase that could ruin any Saturday. What kind of something? "It's better if we talk in person." A pause. "Can you come Saturday afternoon around 2? I glanced at Peyton. He was hauling compost into the west bed like the dirt owed him money. His shirt was drenched, his hat was backwards, and he looked like peace in motion. "Sure," I said. "Should I bring anything?" "Just yourself, and Peyton, of course." The call ended before I could even say goodbye. I stood there for a full minute, phone in hand, heart sinking like it already knew what was coming. "Family meeting," Peyton said from behind me without even turning around. I didn't ask how he knew. He always knew, apparently. What's the occasion? She didn't say, but I've got a feeling it's not about homemade jam recipes. Peyton wiped sweat from his brow and straightened. "They're going to ask us for something. You think I know." It's weird how your body remembers stress like muscle memory. My palms started to sweat, my chest got tight, and suddenly I was 16 again, sitting at the dinner table while everyone talked over me. That night, we didn't watch Netflix. We didn't read. We just sat on the porch swing watching the stars come out one by one like they were being brave. Peyton held my hand without saying much. Eventually he said, "Whatever they ask for, you don't owe them anything. I know." "Do you?" "Yeah," I said. "I think I do." But the truth is, I wasn't sure. Because here's the thing, guilt doesn't listen to reason. It just sits in your chest like a heavy rock that never melts. My family had never come to me for help, not once. And now they were calling a family meeting. It was like asking the kid you ignored all year to sign your yearbook with a check. Wednesday came and went. On Thursday, Erin called. She said the family had been discussing some options, which sounded suspiciously like code for Bethany. "Please come save us," I asked her directly. "Are they going to ask us for money?" Erin hesitated. "It's possible." What happened? She lowered her voice like she thought Tamara might have hidden microphones in her pantry. "It's bad, Beth. Really bad. Elijah made some investments through his firm. High-risk stuff. And he used a lot of family money." "How much is a lot?" "They mortgaged the Hampton house. Your parents' retirement is tied up in it too." I felt something cold crawl down my spine. "Does Peyton know?" "He suspects. He always knows." That's the thing about farmers. They can smell a storm coming long before the sky gets dark. Friday night, I baked bread, not because we needed it, but because kneading dough was the only thing keeping me from exploding. There's something meditative about punching flour into submission. Peyton came in, washing his hands in the sink. "I talked to Leonard," he said. "Our lawyer, Leonard?" He nodded. I stopped kneading. Why? Just in case. In case of what? In case they think they're going to corner us. That's when I realised Peyton wasn't nervous. He was ready. "What do you think they'll ask?" "They're going to want us to sell the farm." I stared at him. "No," I said. "No way. Not happening." He smiled. Not out of joy, out of recognition. Good. Because I'm not letting go of this land, not for anyone. There's a term in behavioural economics, loss aversion bias. It means people fear losing something more than they value gaining something. And right then, I knew my family was going to try and frame their desperation as my responsibility. Saturday morning arrived with grey skies and air that felt too still. We got dressed like we were going to battle. Peyton in his cleanest button-down, me in a simple sundress, no frills, no message, just fabric and purpose. As we pulled into my parents' driveway, I caught my reflection in the window. I didn't look scared. I looked done. My phone buzzed with a new text. Unknown number. "Emergency family meeting. Please come. We need you. Tamara." And there it was, the first time in her life she'd ever admitted needing me. The house looked the same. Too neat. Like someone had pressed pause on a movie that had already ended. Peyton parked. Neither of us moved. "You ready?" he asked. "No, but I'm going anyway." He reached across and squeezed my hand. "That's my girl." It echoed what he'd said at our wedding. And I couldn't help but wonder, what were they going to ask us to give up? And more importantly, what were they willing to lose to get it? Because they were coming for our dirt. They just didn't know yet it was worth more than gold. They were waiting for us, like a jury already halfway through the verdict. The living room was unnaturally clean. I don't mean tidy, I mean surgical. Like someone had gone over it twice with lemon-scented panic. The pillows were arranged like soldiers. The coasters were perfectly stacked, and every single lamp was on. Bright. Blinding. My parents sat on the couch, back straight, hands clasped. Tamara was perched on the edge of an armchair, as if perfect posture would somehow keep her from collapsing under the weight of her own nerves. Her leather portfolio rested on her knees like a bomb. Elijah stood near the window with his arms crossed, jaw tight. His hair, usually lacquered into real estate magazine neatness, looked like he'd run his hands through it a dozen times. He didn't say a word. Only Erin looked human. She sat awkwardly on the ottoman, one foot curled under her hands, tangled in her lap. When I made eye contact, she gave me the smallest shrug that said, "Sorry I exist right now." Tiffany, Tamara's daughter, sat in the corner with an iPad and noise-cancelling headphones. She looked like she'd been instructed to ignore everything that didn't involve unicorn apps. My dad gestured to 2 chairs across from the couch. "Bethany, Peyton, thanks for coming." We sat. The air was stale. You could almost smell the desperation under the air freshener. So I said, folding my hands in my lap, "What's this about?" My mum twisted her wedding ring, something she always did when her words weren't cooperating. We wanted to talk about the situation. "What situation?" Peyton asked. Calm, level. Elijah finally turned from the window, and for the first time in my life, he didn't look smug. He looked haunted. "Oh, come on," he snapped. "Cut the act. You know exactly what this is about." "Let's all stay calm," Tamara said, her voice tight. "There's no need to make this more difficult than it already is." "Then maybe someone should try explaining what's going on," I said. "Because right now, it just feels like we're about to be guilted into something." My father cleared his throat. Elijah made some investments. They didn't pan out. And unfortunately, several accounts were impacted. "Impacted," I repeated. "You mean lost." Silence. "Your parents' retirement funds," my mother added quietly. "They're gone." The room pressed in. I looked at Elijah. "You used their money." "I used my clients' money," he snapped, "including family members." "Yes. But I did what I thought was best at the time." The market turned. "No," I said. "You turned. The market just watched." Tamara leaned forward. "We're not here to assign blame. We're here to look for solutions." "Oh," Peyton said. "And what kind of solution were you hoping for?" My father reached into a leather folder on the table. I'd seen that folder before. It held legal documents, purchase agreements, deeds. "We need you to sell the farm." The words landed like a punch to the solar plexus. "Excuse me," I said. "We need you to sell the property," he repeated calmly. "It's the only asset not currently tied up. If we sell it, we can pay off the debts, stabilize the situation, and move forward." "You're asking us to give up our home," I said. "Our business, everything we've built." "It's just land," Elijah said, waving a hand. "You can start over somewhere else. Heck, we'll help you find another property." Peyton's jaw twitched. That was the only sign I got. "Start over," he repeated, like it's a software update. Tamara's voice slipped into that brittle, glassy tone she used when she was afraid, but trying to sound like a TED Talk speaker. "Bethany, please, be reasonable. This is about family, about doing the right thing." "You mean saving the family," I said, "from the mess you created." "We didn't create this mess alone," my father shot back. "You left us. You walked away from the family's values. You chose a different path. And you looked down on it every step of the way," I said, standing up slowly. "You treated us like a joke, like dirt under your shoes." Tamara stood too. Her control finally cracked. "You're playing house on a patch of weeds. This," she gestured wildly around her, "is real life. These are real consequences. You've been living in a fantasy." "Funny," I said. "I was about to say the same to you." My mother stood. Tears welled in her eyes, not the glossy ones for show, but real ones. "We're not perfect," she said, "but we're family, and family helps family." I looked around the room at the people who had made my life feel small for so long, who only remembered I existed when they needed something. I looked at Peyton. He nodded once, slowly. "We'll think about it," I said, finally. Erin looked up sharply. "Really? We'll give you an answer Monday, I said. But you should think about something too. What my father asked. What kind of people ask someone to destroy their life to fix a mistake they didn't make? They didn't answer. They couldn't. And that's when I knew we weren't really a family. Not anymore. We didn't speak in the car. I mean, we made sounds. Peyton cleared his throat once. I think I said wow to the windshield. But for the most part, the silence between us was louder than any music could have been. The gravel crunched under the tyres like we were driving over bones. When we got home, I stood on our porch for a long minute before going inside. The farmhouse looked smaller somehow, not in size but in scale compared to the absurd request we'd just heard. Sell this life for what? So Elijah could keep his Lexus. Peyton didn't follow me inside. He went to the barn. I knew better than to chase him. I sat on the couch, still in my uncomfortable sandals, and stared at the ceiling like it might start talking sense into me. I was still sitting there 20 minutes later when Peyton called from the doorway. Come to the barn. That was all he said. I followed without a word, sandals clapping on the porch, then sinking slightly in the evening soft earth. The barn smelled like hay and oil, and that specific kind of wood dust that somehow always smells a little like cinnamon. He led me to the back, past the tools, past the shelves of seed packets, past the old tractor engine he'd been taking apart since October. There was a filing cabinet tucked under his workbench, one I'd never seen open. He pulled the bottom drawer. I need you to sit down. Peyton, if this is about tax receipts. It's not. I sat. He laid a thick manila folder on the work table, then another. And another. What is this? He opened the first one. This, he said, tapping the top page, is a patent for the irrigation system I developed for the North Field. The header read, United States Patent and Trademark Office, Peyton J. Stone, Advanced Precision Agriculture Irrigation System. I blinked. You filed a patent. 3 years ago. I looked up at him. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wasn't ready. I didn't want to show you half-finished dreams. The second folder was thicker. He opened it to a spreadsheet with graphs and blocks of code I barely understood. This is our soil analytics program. I wrote the software myself. It analyzes nutrient levels and predicts optimal planting windows. You wrote software, he smiled faintly. Turns out my ag engineering degree still works. That's when I remembered something Peyton never talked about college much. Just that he'd done a lot of research work before he came back home. I always assumed he'd gotten tired of academia. Nope. He'd just decided to apply it where it mattered. Beth, he said, his voice quiet, this farm isn't just a farm, it's a test site. I stared at the piles of paper. For what? For Stone Agricultural Technologies. I blinked again. That's a company. Our company. I incorporated it 5 years ago. Quietly. Every system we use, every method, I've tested it all, feeds into our tech platform. I flipped to the last page in the folder, a financial report. I squinted at the number at the bottom, and then squinted harder. That can't be right. It is. I counted the zeros. Peyton. This says we're worth over $50 million. Not us, the company, but yes, all based on the technology developed right here. My legs suddenly felt like uncooked spaghetti. I sat harder than I meant to. Why didn't you say something all these years? I thought we were just simple farmers, he said, one eyebrow raised. I winced. Yeah, something like that. I let them think that Beth, on purpose. Why? Because I wanted to see how they'd treat us when they thought we had nothing. That hit harder than any family insult ever had. You let them mock us. I let them reveal themselves. He leaned on the table, and they did. Every dinner, every barbecue, every time they laughed behind your back or dismissed what we were building, you were the one who stayed kind. You worked harder. You held your head up. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to scream. Another part wanted to cry. A third part wanted to go slap Elijah with a rolled-up quarterly earnings report. And now, Peyton continued, they're coming here on Monday to try and force us to sell what they don't understand. Or I said they're coming to beg. That too. He pulled out one last folder. What's that? Elijah's investment firm. I frowned. Why do you have? He shorted our company. I stared. What? He bet against us, used client money, including your parents, to short Stone AgTech stock. I felt the room tip sideways. He lost their savings betting we would fail. Peyton nodded. He assumed anything tied to a dirt farm couldn't possibly succeed. A long, heavy silence settled between us. I guess we proved him wrong. Peyton looked at me, then really looked at me. Not just as the woman who shared his life, but as the one who had stood by him through every seed order, every broken fence, every snide family comment. They're coming Monday, he said, and we're going to tell them everything. What do you mean? He smiled. And for the first time, it wasn't the calm, quiet Peyton smile. It was something sharper, smarter, a little bit dangerous. We're going to give them what they asked for. I folded my arms. And what's that? A real education. Monday came, dressed like a courtroom drama. 3 cars rolled up our driveway at exactly 200 p.m., kicking up a fine layer of dust that settled ironically on their luxury sedans. Tamara stepped out first, wearing a tailored white blouse and those sunglasses that say, I'm not here for pleasantries. Elijah followed, jaw-tight tie slightly askew. My parents emerged together, unusually quiet. And trailing behind them, Erin carrying a tote bag and holding Tiffany's hand. Showtime, Peyton said from the front porch. He was in jeans, a plain grey t-shirt and boots. No power suit. No blazer, just the same Peyton who'd quietly built a $50 million company under their noses. The knock on the door was sharp. My father's knock. I opened it. They were lined up like a delegation ready to deliver terms or ultimatums, I wasn't sure which. Come in, I said, stepping aside. They moved past me like a gust of nerves. I caught a whiff of Tamara's expensive perfume, something French and judgmental. We led them into the living room. Everything was in place. The old wooden coffee table, the mismatched couch cushions, the hand-sewn quilt, our lives in full display, unapologetic. We'll stand, Elijah said, declining the invitation to sit. This won't take long. My father opened a leather portfolio and laid out a stack of papers like a dealer at a blackjack table. We've already had the property appraised. There's a buyer lined up. All you need to do is sign. The sale papers sat there like an accusation. You had our land appraised, I asked. We're trying to be efficient. My mother said quickly, but her voice shook. Whose time are we saving? Peyton asked, calm as a lake. Yours or the creditors? Don't play games, Elijah snapped. You know what's at stake. Our parents could lose their home. Tamara and I, our assets are frozen. Tiffany's college fund is gone. Daddy, what's happening? Tiffany asked in a small voice, tugging at his sleeve. Nothing, sweetheart, Tamara said quickly. The adults are just sorting things out. Peyton stood then, slow and deliberate. You're right, he said. Family should look out for each other, which is why we think it's time to finally be honest. He walked over to his desk and picked up the thick manila folder. What's that? Tamara asked, eyeing it like it was a bomb. Information, he said, returning to the centre of the room, about who we really are and what this land really is. We don't have time for theatrics, my father said. You'll want to hear this, Peyton replied, setting the folder down. Elijah, in your professional opinion, what's this farm worth? Elijah scoffed. I already said 200, maybe 300,000 if you bulldoze the barn and repurpose the land. Interesting, Peyton said, opening the folder. Then, what would you say about a research and development site for a privately owned agricultural technology company that currently holds 27 patents? Silence. He pulled out a patent number 10, 847392. Advanced precision irrigation system, filed 3 years ago, developed and tested here. He laid another page down. Soil analytics software, deployed in 12 states. He pulled out a glossy report and flipped it to the final page. Estimated company valuation $51.2 million as of last quarter. Tamara sank into the armchair like the air had been punched out of her. My mother made a soft, breathy noise. My father's hand gripped the armrest. Elijah went completely still. Peyton wasn't finished. Elijah, he said, you might recognize the company name Stone Agricultural Technologies. Elijah blinked. I've heard of it. I know you have, because you shorted it. Elijah turned a full shade lighter. What? You bet client money, including my in-laws' retirement accounts, against our success. Tamara looked at him. You told me it was a safe bet. I thought Elijah started, but stopped. He looked at me like I had personally tricked him. I leaned forward, placing my palms flat on the table. You bet we'd fail, and every time we succeeded, your clients lost money, including my parents. Erin let out a slow breath. That's why Mom and Dad won't say exactly how much they lost. Peyton nodded, because if they did, they'd have to admit it was Elijah's arrogance, not the market, that cost them everything. My mother looked at Elijah, her face pale. You told us it was a sure thing. I didn't know, he muttered. I didn't know it was you. And that, I said, is the point. You know that old saying, pride comes before the fall. My grandmother used to say, it's not the fall that gets you, it's the surprise landing. Tamara looked at the documents. So you're saying this place, this land, is worth $50 million? Technically, Peyton said the company is worth that, but the farm is its heart. The systems were built here, tested here. Everything you mocked happened here. My father stood slowly. You let us believe you were barely scraping by. I didn't let you believe anything I said. You saw what you wanted to see. You laughed at what you didn't understand. And now, Peyton added, you're asking us to give it up. For what, to clean up the mess your golden boy made? Tamara's eyes were wet. We didn't know. That's exactly the problem, I said. You never wanted to know. The room was so quiet. We could hear Tiffany's iPad start playing theme music from a cartoon. No one moved. Peyton sat back down. You asked for a solution. Here it is. We're not selling. We're not bailing you out. And we're definitely not handing over the thing you spent years mocking. Tamara whispered, but we're family. I met her eyes. Then maybe you should have acted like it. You ever hear that thing about how you can tell what someone truly thinks of you by how they act when they need you? Yeah, that theory held up real quick once my family realised we weren't going to roll over. Tamara stood slowly, arms limp at her sides like the strings holding her up had been cut. Bethany, she said, her voice wobbling in a way I'd never heard. You can't really mean this. I've never meant anything more. Elijah suddenly stepped forward a little too fast, like he'd just remembered something important, like his mortgage. Listen, he said, hands slightly raised. Maybe we got off on the wrong foot today. No one here is saying this has to be permanent. If you sell now, get us through this rough patch, we'll make it up to you. Down the line. I blinked. You're offering to reimburse us later. Exactly, he said, like I was finally catching up. You have the liquidity, we don't. Liquidity? Peyton muttered. Is that what we're calling life's work now? Beth, my mum, jumped in, voice more urgent now. We wouldn't be here if we had any other options. Your father and I, we trusted Elijah. And now we've lost everything. I hated how fast my heart twisted at the sound of her voice. That old instinct to fix, to soothe, to earn her approval, it flared up like an old injury reacting to weather. You didn't just lose money, I said. You lost the right to call this place just dirt. You lost the right to look down on the life we built. But it's Tiffany's future, Tamara said, suddenly, gesturing to her daughter, who was now looking up, headphones slipped off. Her college, her opportunities. That was your job to protect, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. You gambled with her future when you let your husband play investment roulette with family money. She's just a child, Tamara snapped. And what am I? I fired back. Your insurance policy. Everyone went quiet again. Here's your quirky fact for this section. When octopuses are threatened, they eject ink not just to obscure vision, but to dull the predator's sense of smell. That's what this felt like, my family throwing every manipulative argument into the room to cloud our senses, hoping we'd forget how much it hurt to be treated like a joke for so long. Peyton reached into the folder again and pulled out one final document. There's something else. Elijah narrowed his eyes. What now? A transaction report, Peyton said, handing it to Leonard, who had just entered. Yes, our lawyer came in exactly when needed, like a third-act plot twist in a courtroom drama. Briefcase calm expression, not a single hair out of place. Leonard flipped through the report, adjusted his glasses and said, Mr. Olson, this shows your firm executed a set of shorts against Stone Agricultural Technologies stock under a client group labelled Blair Discretionary. You listed those accounts as non-active managed family assets. My father's brows knit together. What does that mean? It means, Leonard said smoothly, Elijah used your retirement money to bet against your daughter's company. Now that hit like thunder. My mother's face drained of colour. You told us that fund was in a low-risk bond, she whispered. Elijah swallowed hard. It was meant to be. I didn't know it was her company. And that's the point, I said again, quieter this time. You didn't know. Because you never asked. You assumed I was playing in the mud while you all changed the world from conference rooms and catered brunches. We didn't mean my father started, but his voice broke. You meant every word I said. You made fun of us at every dinner, every wedding, every holiday. You didn't even try to understand what we were doing. Erin, who'd been silent until now, suddenly stood. I did. Everyone turned. I didn't say anything before because I was scared, she continued. I didn't want to rock the boat, but I saw what you built, Beth. I've always seen it. I just didn't know how to stand up for you when everyone else was so loud. Her eyes were red, not from performance, from guilt. Tamara looked at her like she'd just switched teams mid-game. You were supposed to support us, she said coldly. I was supposed to support truth, Erin snapped back. And the truth is, you all treated Bethany like garbage until you realised she was the only one standing on solid ground. That shut everyone up. And here's your academic debate phrase of the section, in case you were wondering. There is a substantial difference between relational obligation and exploitative expectation. I read that once in a psychology journal, and it never made more sense than it did in that moment. We weren't being asked to help family. We were being expected to bail out people who had spent years undermining us. You want us to save you, I said slowly. Then admit you were wrong. Admit you mocked us. Admit you saw us as less. Tamara opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Elijah looked like he'd aged 10 years in 20 minutes. My mother put her hand over her mouth and shook her head. And my father, stoic, cold, ever controlled, finally sat down. I don't understand how this happened, he said softly. I thought we were doing everything right. I looked at Peyton. He looked at me. And for once, I didn't feel small. I felt seen. You did everything right for yourselves, I said gently. But for us, you never saw us as equals. Just a backup plan. Erin spoke up again, her voice low. So what now? I answered for both of us. You leave, you go home, and you figure out how to rebuild without asking us to lose everything we've built. Tamara's lip trembled. We're family. No, I said. We share blood. That's not the same thing. Peyton reached for the folder and began calmly returning each document, each patent, each proof of life, ours, not theirs, into place. They didn't speak as they left. And honestly, that was the most respectful they'd ever been. They drove away in silence like mourners leaving a funeral, except no one had died, just a version of our relationship that had been on life support for decades. From the kitchen window, I watched their cars trail dust down the long gravel path, headlights dim in the late afternoon sun. Peyton stood behind me, arms crossed, face unreadable. So I said, "That happened." He didn't answer right away, just walked over to the sink and turned on the faucet like washing the dust off his hands would help wash off the weight of the day. "I thought it would feel better," I admitted, putting them in their place, but mostly it just feels quiet. "Sometimes quiet is the reward," he said. We didn't eat dinner that night, just shared a single slice of sourdough and a couple spoonfuls of canned peaches. You know, celebratory farmer stuff. But neither of us really had the appetite. And in case you're wondering, here's your off-topic fact of the section. Bananas are technically berries, but strawberries aren't. That blew my mind more than the appraisal numbers on our property. Anyway, the next morning I woke up to 37 unread messages, texts, missed calls, a voicemail from my mother that started with please and ended with a very Catholic-sounding sigh. One from Tamara that said nothing but "you'll regret this." One from a number I didn't recognise with the subject line proposal. Urgent. I turned the phone off and rolled over. Let the silence have one more day. By Wednesday, the calls had slowed to a trickle. Erin texted once just a single line. "I'm proud of you," even if it cost me them. I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't respond yet. Some wounds don't need bandages, they need air. Thursday morning, Peyton came into the kitchen holding a letter. "Mail's here," he said, setting it on the table like it might bite me. It was from the Department of Agriculture. I opened it. My breath caught. We'd been awarded a grant $2.7 million over 3 years to develop drought-resistant crop systems for regions affected by climate change. The government wanted to fund our farm. "Peyton," I whispered, this is huge." He smiled finally. That soft sideways smile that never pushed, just waited. "I wanted to tell you last week," he said, before the meeting, "but I figured you had enough on your plate." "Yeah, just the usual. Emotional betrayal, casual family implosion, normal Monday." We laughed. Actually laughed. That night, we stood in the field staring out at the rows of kale and squash like they were diamonds. Peyton kicked at a clod of earth. "They thought this was just dirt," he said. They always did. I think he added we should expand, build out the north greenhouse, add more sensors, maybe even hire a second team. I turned to him. "You're talking like this is just the beginning." "It is," he said. "It always was." And maybe that was the truest part of it all. While they were busy measuring square footage and trophy walls, we were building something invisible, but real, layer by layer, seed by seed. So here's your old age wisdom for the day. Don't plant your self-worth in someone else's garden. It won't grow there. The next Sunday, Erin showed up. No call, no text, just a knock on the door and a bag of groceries in her hands. "Can I come in?" she asked. "Only if there's ice cream in that bag." There was. Rocky Road, because she remembered it was the flavour I always claimed not to like, but somehow ate anyway. We sat at the kitchen table. No pressure. Just sisters trying to remember how to talk. "I'm sorry," she said, "for not standing up for you sooner." "You don't have to say that." "Yes, I do," she insisted. "I watched them chip away at you for years, and I just stood there, neutral, like Switzerland in a family war." I smiled faintly. "Switzerland has great chocolate, though. Don't change the subject." We were quiet for a while. Then she said something I didn't expect. "Tamara's not doing well." "Oh." "She's unravelling. She keeps talking about how you set them up, that you had a master plan." I nearly snorted my tea. A master plan, like I'm some kind of evil genius with a barn lair. "She thinks you baited them. Let them fall apart so you could make a point." "I didn't have to bait them, Erin. They walked into the trap they built themselves." She nodded. "I know, but she doesn't. And Mom, she's been telling people you abandoned the family. Let her." Erin looked up. "You really don't care." I paused. I think I finally don't. That realization settled over me like warm sunlight. I didn't care what they said at cocktail parties or over wine-drenched phone calls, because here in the dirt, they laughed at was proof of everything we'd built. and none of it was for them. After Erin left, Peyton joined me on the porch. "She's trying," he said. "She is. Do you think they'll ever change?" I thought about that for a moment. I think they'll evolve, but only if it serves them. Not because they understand what they did. And I'm done evolving for other people. He reached over and laced his fingers through mine. "I don't know if we won," I said, "but I think we walked away with everything that matters." He nodded towards the fields, the soft gold of evening brushing against the leaves, and that's what they never understood. The thing about peace is that it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't ride in on a white horse or drop from the sky like a confetti bomb. It sneaks in the side door, settles into your bones, and lets you exhale without realizing you'd been holding your breath for years. A week after Erin's visit, things were, dare I say it, normal. Peyton was experimenting with a new compost blend that smelled exactly as terrible as you'd expect. I was organising CSA orders and trying to remember which restaurant chef insisted on visually assertive carrots. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, a sleek black car pulled into our driveway. I wasn't expecting anyone. I stepped onto the porch garden, gloves still on half a smear of soil across my cheek. A woman in her 40s stepped out dressed in jeans and a button-up with a government ID lanyard flapping against her chest in the breeze. "Mrs. Stone," she called. "Yep," I said, too tired to be formal. "I'm Sarah Martinez," she said, walking over with a warm but professional smile. "Department of Agriculture. I was hoping to speak with you and your husband about your drought-resistant crop system trials. The preliminary results were, well, promising would be an understatement." I blinked. "You came all the way out here for that?" Sarah grinned. "We don't drive this far for fun." Peyton must have heard because he emerged from the barn like a movie hero in denim and dust. "Sarah," he said, shaking her hand. "Glad you made it." "You didn't tell me we were getting a visit," I said, narrowing my eyes. "I didn't know for sure," he replied. "Just had a feeling." She opened a folder. "The USDA would like to fast-track your grant approval. We're talking extended trials, additional funding, 2.7 million over 3 years. You're on the short list for national deployment if the next round goes well." I sat down hard on the porch step. I mean, I knew the work Peyton was doing mattered, but national deployment, that wasn't just feeding our local restaurants. That was feeding the future. Sarah stayed for coffee. We talked soil acidity, climate impact sensor calibration. Okay, they talked. I nodded at the right places and added jokes about worms. Before she left, she said, "It's not often we find innovation where no one's looking." And that sentence stuck with me long after her car disappeared down the road. Later that night, Peyton and I sat under the porch light, watching moths dance like they were drunk on dusk. The stars blinked overhead, soft and indifferent. "You still thinking about them?" he asked. I knew who he meant. "No," I said honestly, "I'm thinking about us." He handed me a mason jar with lemonade and a little too much whiskey. "You think we've really done it?" I asked. "Built something real." He looked out at the rows of greens at the barn, with its sensors and secrets at the lights from the greenhouse blinking like fireflies. "I think we're just getting started. Here's your old age wisdom for this section, courtesy of my grandmother. Again, you can't grow anything worth keeping in someone else's shadow." I used to think that meant forging my own path. Now I realise it meant getting the heck out from under my family's long, cold expectations. Speaking of shadows, Tamara wasn't done. I got an email the next day, subject line clarification. I stared at it for 10 full minutes before opening it. It wasn't long. "Bethany, we all said things we regret. I hope someday you'll remember the good times. Tiffany keeps asking about you. I won't keep her from you if you want to visit. But if you're still determined to be separate, I understand." Tamara, separate. That word rattled around in my head like a marble in a tin cup. I didn't reply. Not yet. Because honestly, it wasn't about separation anymore. It was about clarity. They hadn't changed, but I had. The best part, I didn't need to be angry anymore. I didn't need revenge or vindication. What I needed was what I already had: a home that smelled like rosemary, and soil a partner who looked at spreadsheets and seed packets with the same level of enthusiasm and work that felt, at last, like purpose. Still, I did print the email and tape it to the back of the pantry door next to an old quote I'd scribbled in a moment of defiance: when they doubt you grow anyway. There's a strange power in being underestimated. They'd written me off as a hobbyist, a sentimental girl who settled for dirt and calloused hands. And yet here I was, part of a national agricultural research initiative with a partner whose tech was changing the way crops are grown in drought zones. Funny how mud looks different under a microscope. The next Sunday, we hosted a community dinner. Farmers, chefs' neighbours, even a few local students curious about agri-tech. No suits, no judgments, just folding tables, fresh tomatoes and stories. Erin came too, no makeup, just a hoodie and a pie she swore was homemade, jury's still out. She brought Tiffany. The little girl ran up to me, wrapped her arms around my waist and said, "Mum says you're really good at growing stuff." I knelt down. I try my best. "Can I see your garden tomorrow? Only if you help me pull weeds." She made a face. "Do I get a popsicle after?" "2 if you don't cry when you see the worms." She grinned. "Deal." I watched her run off into the twilight, chasing fireflies and shouting about who got the last dinner roll. And I thought maybe this is how it starts over. Not with apologies, but with new roots. There's something about kids that resets the world for you, like when you're in a tangle of generational bitterness and corporate betrayal, and then a child asks if ladybugs have last names. Suddenly, nothing else matters for a moment. Tiffany spent most of Monday morning in my garden. She didn't pull a single weed for the record, but she did name 3 rows of carrots after the cast of Encanto and built a tiny tomato palace using sticks and string. At one point, she looked up at me with dirt on her nose and said, "You don't look like someone who saves the world, but Mum says you are." I think my heart grew 3 sizes and then broke a little. She really said that. Tiffany nodded. But she said it all quiet, like when she's mad. Ah, yes, the passive-aggressive compliment, a Tamara classic. Later that week, I got a call from Leonard. His voice was calm, but I've learned that Leonard calm usually means prepare for impact. "Just a heads up," he said. "Your family's talking about legal options." I laughed, like an actual laugh, the kind you let out when your coffee spills and you step on a Lego. "You're kidding. I never joke about litigation," he said dryly. "Your father mentioned something about reclaiming a family asset through probate appeal." "The land isn't part of the estate," I said, already pacing. "I know, you know, but he's reaching. You think they'll really try?" Honestly, Leonard sighed. "They're desperate. That's when people get stupid. There's this academic debate about ownership, whether it's defined by paper or by care. Spoiler alert, both matter, but only one of them will hold up in court." "Thanks for the heads up," I said. "Should I be worried?" "No, just be ready." After I hung up, I walked outside straight into the warm afternoon sun. Peyton was trimming a row of basil, humming some old folk tune that had no actual melody, but still somehow got stuck in my head. "They're threatening legal action," I said, sitting on the edge of a planter box. He didn't even flinch, just kept snipping. "Of course they are." "You're not surprised." "Beth, you could hand them a gold-plated parachute and they'd complain about the straps." He wasn't wrong, but still part of me felt that familiar tremor, the kind that comes from being the black sheep who finally grew horns. That evening, we pulled the chairs onto the porch again. There's something sacred about porch time. Maybe it's the way the sunset makes the fields glow, or how the breeze carries the scent of mint from the herb garden. "I don't want to fight them forever," I said after a while. "We're not fighting," Peyton replied. "We're holding the line." I turned to look at him. "You've really thought this through, haven't you? Every angle." "How long?" "Since the first time your dad called me the boy who fixes tractors." I laughed, then winced. He really said that. At our engagement dinner.
Wow, classy.
I wasn't insulted, Peyton said. I just made a mental note. A mental note, yeah, to never underestimate how little they understood us. I leaned back and stared at the stars. One of them blinked brighter than the others, probably just a satellite, but I liked to pretend it was something special, just for us. The next day, a certified letter arrived. Peyton handed it to me unopened. Want the honours. I tore it open. To whom it may concern, this letter serves as formal notice that the Blair Family Trust will be pursuing legal avenues to reclaim ownership or financial compensation regarding the Stone family farm, given recent revelations about its value. I stopped reading there. So that's it, I said aloud. They're suing us. They're threatening to, Peyton said. Big difference. I passed him the letter. You were right. They're not even embarrassed. They're just angry they didn't see it coming. He folded the letter neatly. That's the thing about entitlement. It doesn't vanish when reality shows up, it just gets louder. Later that night, Leonard called again. We're filing a response. You'll be fine. But just be prepared for the pettiness to escalate. Oh, great, I said. What's next? A petition to repossess our tractor. Don't joke, Leonard replied. They actually listed the equipment as an undisclosed financial asset. And there it was, the official moment when my family decided that tractors need betrayal. You want your quirky fact of the section. Here it is. During the Cold War, the CIA once used pigeons to carry tiny cameras for aerial photography. That's right, spy pigeons. And yet, my family is the most ridiculous plot twist I've encountered. After I hung up, I stood at the kitchen sink staring out at the dark fields. Everything was quiet. Everything was ours. And I realised something. They didn't want justice. They wanted power. But they had already lost it the moment we stopped needing their approval. Peyton came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist, chin resting on my shoulder. We're going to be okay, he said. I know, and I did. Because what we had couldn't be measured in court filings or asset sheets. It was measured in seeds planted, in hands held, in nights spent dreaming big under a sky no one could take from us. They could file all the papers they wanted, but they were never getting this land. Because it wasn't just dirt anymore, it was proof. You ever notice how silence changes shape depending on who's in the room? The next time we saw my parents, it wasn't in a courtroom. It was on neutral ground, a local mediation office with cold coffee industrial carpet and chairs designed to make you question your life choices. Tamara wasn't there. Elijah either. Just Mum and Dad. Leonard came with us, briefcase in hand, eyes half-lidded like he was already bored. Peyton sat beside me, arms crossed, the only man alive who could look intimidating in flannel. My father didn't look at me. My mother did, but barely. We didn't exchange hellos. The mediator, a woman named Susan with a voice like an NPR pledge drive, welcomed us and outlined the purpose of the meeting. We are here today to explore whether there is a mutually beneficial resolution. My father cleared his throat. The land is worth more than you told us. Peyton didn't blink. No one ever asked. You misrepresented yourselves, he added, and I could tell it was a rehearsed line. You mean we didn't tell you we were successful? I said, eyebrows raised. Sorry for not sending out a press release. Bethany, my mum, interjected. This is already painful enough. Let's not make it worse. I'm not the one who filed paperwork. Susan tried to redirect. Let's focus on the current goal. The Blair family believes they are entitled to partial ownership of the farm based on historic support during its founding. Peyton leaned forward. We paid them back with interest. I have the cancelled cheques and repayment agreements. Leonard slid the documents across the table like they were a deck of Uno cards. My father didn't touch them. The point is, none of this would have happened without our foundation. And none of your foundation would have crumbled if you hadn't bet against us, I replied. There was that silence again, heavy, tense. But this time it didn't scare me, because I wasn't the one on trial. You think because we didn't talk about our success, I continued that it means you're owed a piece of it. You hid it, my mum said softly. You kept us in the dark. Mum, I said, you all decided I had failed the moment I said I was moving to the farm. You didn't ask about my business. You didn't ask how we were doing. You assumed. Every year, every holiday, you laughed at me, you pitied me. That's not fair, she said almost reflexively. No, I turned to my father. Remember when I brought that home-canned tomato sauce to Thanksgiving? You called it Third World Marinara in front of Uncle Greg. My dad flinched. Not because he remembered, because he didn't. That was years ago, he muttered. Exactly, I said. Years of mockery, years of never being good enough unless I played your game. And now that our dirt farm is worth something, you suddenly remember I exist. The mediator tried to intervene. Bethany, I understand, this is emotional. No, it's math, I said. We owe them nothing, and they know it. Leonard cleared his throat. If I may, the legal precedent for this claim is flimsy at best. The land is not part of the Blair Trust. All assistance was repaid, and Stone Agricultural Technologies is a separate incorporated entity. He folded his hands. In other words, this isn't a negotiation, it's a courtesy. My father's face twisted. After everything we've done for you, I sat up straighter. Let's talk about that. Peyton reached for my hand under the table. I didn't even look at him, just needed the anchor. Let's talk about how, when I graduated summa cum laude, you said, too bad it wasn't in something real. Let's talk about how you told your friends I was going through a phase. How at my wedding, you practically eulogized me in your speech. That's what you've done for me. My mum was crying now. Not the gentle, mascara-friendly tears, real ones, angry ones. The kind that sting because they mean she knows I'm right. You think we were cruel, she said. I think you were dismissive, cold, and worst of all, I think you thought you were right. There's an old saying maybe from a church newsletter or an embroidered pillow. Just because you gave someone life doesn't mean you own their story. I didn't belong to them anymore. I wasn't sure I ever had. The mediator sighed. I think it's clear we're not going to reach an agreement today. Nope, I said, standing. But we did reach a conclusion. Leonard gathered the documents calmly. Peyton stood with me. Do you want to say goodbye? My mom asked. I shook my head. No, I want to say thank you. My dad narrowed his eyes. For what? For finally showing me who you are, I said. So I can stop hoping you'll become someone else. We walked out of that building into the late afternoon sun, the air crisp and the gravel crunching beneath our boots. Peyton reached for my hand again. That was a lot, he said. Yeah. You okay? I took a breath. I think I've never been more okay. The sky looked different that night. I know that sounds dramatic, but it really did. There was a kind of brightness in the dark, a clarity to the stars that felt earned. Maybe it was just the dust settling in my chest. Maybe it was relief. Or maybe it was what it feels like when a weight you've carried your whole life finally slips off your shoulders and hits the ground with a soft thud. Peyton and I were back home, shoes kicked off at the door mugs of peppermint tea warming our hands. We didn't speak much. We didn't need to. Until I said, do you ever think they'll understand? He looked out the window toward the barn where the sensor lights blinked like fireflies doing Morse code. No, he said, but they'll remember, and somehow that was enough. The next morning, I was back in the field. Tomatoes needed checking. The beets were dramatic and trying to bolt. It felt good to sweat for something that gave back. There's a kind of healing that comes from pulling weeds. It's aggressive, cathartic, and when you're done, you can actually see what's left standing. Around mid-morning, Erin showed up. She brought coffee and that tired smile she'd been wearing since Christmas 3 years ago. Tiffany's at a friend's, she said, settling onto the porch step like she belonged there. We sipped in silence until she asked, do you think they'll sue again? No, I said. They got embarrassed. Now they'll get quiet. She nodded. Tamara's furious. Said you manipulated them. I told the truth. Exactly. We sat for a moment before she asked, "Can I tell you something weird?" Always. When we were kids, she said, "I used to envy you." I almost dropped my coffee. Me. "Yeah, you didn't care what they thought." "Not really. I mean, you tried to make them proud, but you never bent the way I did. Tamara bent too, but only upward toward power. I just twisted in the wind. But you planted yourself." I didn't know what to say, so I said the first thing that came to mind. I had no idea. "I know," she said, setting down her cup. "That's why I'm here. Not to apologise anymore. I've done that. I'm here to say I'm proud of you. Not just for the company or the land, but for not giving up on yourself." I blinked back something suspiciously salty. "That means more than you know." She gave a small laugh. "Oh, I know. I've been watching this family implode since birth. Here's your quirky fact of the day. Sharks are older than trees." That's right. Sharks have existed for over 400 million years, while trees evolved around 350 million years ago. That means nature said, let's try teeth first, then foliage, which honestly explains a lot about how my family operates. Later that week, Leonard emailed us a formal notice the Blair family's legal team had withdrawn their claim. Just like that. No apology, no explanation. Just a line in the sand they finally realised they couldn't cross. Peyton printed it out and taped it inside the barn next to the original grant approval letter. "You're making a little museum wall," I said. He grinned. "Motivation." I kissed his cheek. "Revenge is your love language, only when it's legally binding." That Saturday, we hosted our biggest CSA pickup yet. Cars lined the dirt road, kids chased chickens with permission, and one woman even asked if she could get married in the sunflower patch. We said yes, as long as she brings cake. People were laughing, chatting, tasting plum preserves like they were wine sommeliers. And in the middle of it all stood Peyton, covered in dust, handing out basil bunches and irrigation tips like a rock star with leafy groupies. That's when I felt it again, that sensation I'd only ever had once before. The night after our wedding, when we lay under the stars and he whispered, "Whatever happens, we choose each other." This life, this wildly unpolished, sunburned, vegetable-stained life was ours, and they couldn't take it. Not with lawsuits, not with shame, not even with years of emotional manipulation cleverly disguised as tradition. That night, we walked the field at dusk. The rows were long. The air smelled like mint and wet dirt, and my boots were full of thistles. But I didn't care. "You think they'll ever forgive us?" I asked. Peyton raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "For not becoming who they wanted." He thought for a second. "I think they'll say they did. One day, when the story gets retold enough." I nodded. "They'll forget the lawsuits, the insults, the way they laughed. But we won't." "No," I agreed, "we won't. And that's okay. Because memory isn't about keeping score. It's about planting truth so deep that nothing can dig it up." The next morning, the sun rose red and early, peeking over the fields like it was checking in on us. "Hey, you guys. Good, want me to shine extra today." That's the thing about living this close to the land. Even the sky feels personal. I was in the greenhouse thinning lettuce seedlings when I heard Peyton call from the barn. "Beth, you might want to come see this." Now, when your husband shouts from the barn, there are only 3 possible explanations. A goat is loose, a pipe is leaking. Something major just changed your entire week. Thankfully, it was option 3. I walked in and saw him standing with a woman in a government windbreaker tan, boots, clipboard, serious bun. "Bethany Stone," she asked, offering a firm handshake. "Depends," I said. "Are you selling extended warranties?" Peyton grinned. She laughed. "No, ma'am. I'm Sarah Martinez with the Department of Agriculture. I emailed last month about your drought tolerance trials." "Oh, right." The files Peyton had been submitting for months. The grant application, I thought, would be ignored like all the others. Sarah smiled and glanced around. "This is more than impressive. You've got tech, biodiversity, data logging, even community education. We think you're the future of sustainable farming in climate-sensitive regions. I blinked. Thank you, she nodded. We'd like to offer full federal grant backing for Phase 2 trials. It's a 3-year package, $2.7 million with options to renew. I think I forgot how to breathe. Behind me, Peyton gave a soft whistle. That'll buy a lot of compost. I asked, does this mean... What exactly does this mean? Sarah smiled. It means your work isn't just impressive, it's necessary. We want to help you scale, globally. And just like that, the dirt they mocked was suddenly international currency. Later that day, when the trucks rolled in with new drip sensors and solar panels funded by the grant, we just stood there in the field watching. I looked at Peyton. Is this really happening? He smiled. This is what happens when you stop hiding. We didn't host a party that night, but we did make extra spaghetti and open the good wine, the one I'd been saving for, well, something worth celebrating. Think we should tell your family, Peyton asked, twirling noodles on his fork. I considered it. Really considered it. Nah, I said. They'll find out eventually. You sure? Yeah. Let them hear it from someone else. Preferably someone who still thinks we grow carrots for fun. Old age wisdom, fact of the day. Never waste energy proving yourself to people who already decided not to see you. You could have a Nobel Prize in one hand and a baby goat in the other, and they'd still ask if you've considered real work. I went to bed that night thinking about roots, how they twist, how they hold, how they keep you upright even in storms. My family had laughed at our roots, mocked them, tried to dig them up, but they were never shallow to begin with. Weeks passed, the land got busier, reporters came, grad students asked to intern. Even the local mayor sent a handwritten note about community pride and leadership in green innovation, which was hilarious considering he once called our compost smelly nonsense at a city council meeting. One day, I got a call from Aunt Margaret. You know, the one beehive hair, smoky voice, 3 cats named after royal mistresses. Bethany, darling, I just read an article about you in Modern Agritech. Monthly didn't even know that magazine existed. But there you are on page 12, looking like a revolutionary. I chuckled. It's been a weird month. Your father's furious, you know. Told everyone you sold your soul to corporate America. I sipped my tea. I thought he said we were failures. Well, now he says, you're government-funded failures. Wow, I said, so versatile. She paused. Listen, dear, I always liked you best. Don't tell the others. I think they know. That call was followed by another. Then another. Old classmates, distant cousins. A podcaster who wanted to know how it felt to turn soil into gold. I just kept saying the same thing. We didn't change. We just stopped apologising. One evening, I walked past the barn and found Peyton staring at the wall where he'd pinned all the old rejection letters, dozens of them yellowed and curling. You going to take those down? I asked. He shook his head. Nah, I like the contrast. We stood together in silence, the soft sound of chickens settling in for the night rising like background music. You ever regret not fighting back sooner? I asked. He took a moment, then said no. Timing is everything. You can't pull carrots before they're ready. That was classic Peyton, quiet wisdom in the form of root vegetables. I thought of Tamara, of Elijah, of my parents, of the look on their faces when they realised they had bet against the wrong horse. Do I forgive them? Here's the academic debate phrase of the day. The answer depends on the interpretive lens through which one views accountability and repair. Translation, it's complicated. Forgiveness is a garden. Sometimes it grows wild quickly. Sometimes it needs years of tilling. And sometimes it just never takes root. But I was done watering dead things. There's something surreal about watching your name appear in a research journal, especially when the same people who once laughed at your compost pile are now sharing it on LinkedIn with captions like, proud to be related. The morning our article on adaptive irrigation hit the press, I was in the orchard trimming back an overzealous fig tree. I didn't even notice my phone had 20 unread messages until Erin showed up again, waving her tablet like it was on fire. "You made the cover," she shouted. I blinked at her. "Of what? The Seed Catalogue Digest." "No," she said, bouncing like a caffeinated rabbit. "Sustainable Futures. Quarterly, Peyton's irrigation model is now being taught in 2 universities. To Beth." Peyton, of course, took the news like he always did, with a quiet nod and a suspiciously calm, "That's nice." But I could tell he was glowing on the inside. The man may prefer loam to limelight, but even he couldn't deny what we'd built. Later that evening, I walked the rows alone. The scent of basil lingered in the air. Fireflies blinked like cautious applause. Our land, once the butt of every holiday dinner joke, was now a beacon of innovation proof that value doesn't always wear a necktie. That's when I saw them. 3 cars parked at the end of our long dirt drive. I didn't have to squint. I knew who it was. Tamara, my parents, Elijah. They stood there clearly unsure whether to approach. Elijah paced. My father lit a cigar he never finished. My mother wore sunglasses like armour. I didn't walk toward them. I stood still. Eventually, my mom took a step forward. "Bethany," she said, "we just wanted to see it." Tamara clutched Tiffany's hand, her eyes darting around like she was seeing our land for the first time. I stayed rooted. "You mean the land you wanted us to sell?" Silence. Then softly, Tamara said I was wrong. A pause. "I didn't know what you had here. I didn't try to know, and that was my failure." Her voice cracked. This woman, who once ruled every room she entered, now sounded like someone walking barefoot on glass. Erin appeared beside me, quiet as breath. "They came to me first," she said, "asked me to convince you." "And what did you say?" "I told them it's not mine to fix." I nodded. "Can we talk?" Tamara asked. "No," I said, "but you can listen." She blinked. Even my father looked stunned. "You spent years making me feel like a second-class citizen in my own family," I began. "Every win I earned was dismissed, every dream labelled cute or naive. You called our life simple, like it was an insult, and you only showed up again when you thought you could benefit." "I know," she whispered. "I know. I'm not interested in revenge. I'm not interested in punishing you. I'm interested in peace. But that means boundaries. Real ones." Erin stepped forward. "Beth isn't doing this to hurt you. She's doing it to finally protect herself." Tamara's face crumbled. My mother pulled off her sunglasses, revealing tear-swollen eyes. "I hope one day," my father said, "you'll invite us back." I looked at them, not cruelly, not triumphantly, just clearly. "Maybe," I said, "but not today." They nodded, turned, and left the way they came. Peyton appeared beside me, carrying a basket of eggplants like a low-key knight. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Actually, yeah." Because here's what they didn't understand. Forgiveness is not a return to old patterns. It's the freedom to rewrite your own story, even if it means writing someone out. Old age wisdom, sometimes the most radical form of love, is walking away. Later that night, I stood on the porch and looked out over the fields. The moon was low, full, soft, like a silent witness. I thought of all the nights I'd stared into the dark, wondering if I was doing the right thing, wondering if I'd chosen poorly, wondering if my family would ever see me not as a failure, not as the one who settled, but as someone whole. I no longer wondered. I knew. We'd chosen a life in the dirt, and it bloomed. Here's a quirky fact to end on: trees talk to each other underground, through root systems and fungi. They send nutrients, warn of danger, share life. That's how I see us now, deeply connected, quietly strong, speaking our truth beneath the noise. This isn't the story of revenge. It's the story of reclamation. It's not about dirt. It's about roots, and ours are growing deeper every day. If you're still here, still listening, still wide-eyed in the dark, thank you. Really, Some stories aren't made to shout. Some are meant to whisper their truth into the quiet parts of your soul, the parts that have known doubt, or been underestimated, or stood alone at the edge of the family photo. Maybe tonight, as the lights fade and your breathing slows, you're thinking about your own choices, about who laughed at them, about what they cost you. And maybe, just maybe, you're remembering that no one else gets to define your worth, not your resume, not your family tree, not even your regrets. You are enough. You always were. So before you drift off into sleep or dreams or the hum of tomorrow, hold on to this image. A woman standing in a field of her own making, not perfect, not polished, but real, rooted, unapologetically her own. And if you wake up tomorrow wondering what to do next, start with this. Choose you. Good night, friend. Sleep well.